Hi, it's Cara. Today we're doing my January wrap up. Hopefully this wrap up won't be too chaotic. I'm gonna go and try and go as fast as I can because I don't know, I'm in a weird mood, but we're gonna go efficiently. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars for the read of 4 5-star reads for the month. I read 17 things all up. No DNFs, nothing lower than a 3 stars. All around, most things were 4 stars, and it was a very good reading month. Even some of the things I gave 3 stars, I still also really enjoyed. So basically everything I gave 3 stars, I really enjoyed. So it was a good month all round, but let's get going. So first off, I read The Emperor's Soul, which is in Arcanum Unbounded by Brandon Sanderson. This is a novella set in the same world as Elantris, but in kind of a totally different part of the world. I really enjoyed it. It's a bit of a heisty kind of story, but also looking at magic, and the magic kind of works by convincing things to be other than they are. And I enjoyed it immensely. It was greatly interesting and fun. I gave it 4 stars. I don't really know how else to sell it because it was just really good. I enjoyed my time reading it. It was fun. It said a lot. I don't know. It was a good example of a classic Sanderson piece. Like, I don't know, it was just really solid, and I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I read The Roommate by Rosie Dannon. This is a romance, and I read it on my Kindle, obviously, and it's about a girl and a guy. I can't remember their names now. This was so long ago. And she is leaving. She's like a socialite, kind of like not like an heiress, but like her parents are rich, and she's leaving New England or something like that or upstate New York or somewhere fancy like that, to move to LA because she thinks she needs to change her life upside down. And this guy that she's had a crush on forever, like since high school, is in LA and has a spare spot in his apartment. So he's like, come live with me, or come live in my apartment, because it turns out he's actually going on the road with his band and he's leased out his own room. So then enter this new roommate that she's never met before, and he's a porn star, and a very James Dean-esque porn star, because it's very much like he's the porn star that women love. And she's very uptight. I don't want to say sexually repressed, but like she's never had an orgasm. She's like feels like sex is something blasé to her because she doesn't feel like she's ever had a great experience. And then they have a romance and lots of sex, and it was very good. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I do think I have a problem with romances where I feel so cringe for the first half till I get used to the characters, but I think that's my demisexuality coming through blazingly. Like when they have instances of like, wow, she was just so beautiful, and like extolling their physical virtues from the get-go. I'm like, I just want to fuck her. Like I don't get that. I don't understand. That doesn't make sense to my brain. Someone was like, cringe, and I get like halfway through and I'm like, oh, I like all these characters now. We're good, we're going fine. But yeah, so I gave that 4 stars. Then I listened to Australia Day by Stan Grant, which is I'd say more a collection of essays than his previous work, but all of them are kind of collections of essays, focusing on the idea of Australian nationalism, Australia Day, and what it means as an Indigenous person, Invasion Day, if you will, and how he, especially as Stan Grant, is like, I guess he's in his 50s, and he's had quite a great level of success both within Australia and internationally, and how he feels like he fits in within both Indigenous and white culture in that way. It's super interesting. I do think if you've read Talking to My Country, which was his first book, there are a lot of themes that overlap between Talking to My Country and Australia Day, which is to be expected, but in kind of ways that sometimes I was like, oh yeah, I've heard this before, on we go, on we go. But he does make some brilliant points, especially around like sense of identity and belonging. And it was just super powerful. I really enjoyed it. I also recommend listening to the audiobooks of his works because the audio experience of him narrating them is top notch. So I gave that 5 stars. Then I read The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. This is another little romance, but this is a female-female romance. I didn't love this one as much as I enjoyed The Roommate. I think this is because it's historical. And so I'm not going to dive into many more historical romances. I feel like they're just not for me. It felt very... like I didn't buy the chemistry because it didn't make sense in my head. And yeah, some people absolutely love this. I totally would expect you to. But yeah, I just didn't believe the chemistry. Or I felt really disconnected from the characters. I don't know whether, I'm guessing it's around the fact that it's historical, and I've never really read a historical romance before, and I don't think I will in the future. But yeah, it just really kept me at arm's length. I really wanted to love it because the second one also looks amazing. Like, looks like it would be good if you enjoyed this, but I just didn't. So it was fine. It just wasn't anything special for me. I really appreciate the representation of sapphic relationships in a classic traditional like Avon romance, but like mass market romance, but it just didn't do it for me. It was a 3 stars. Then I read another 5-star read, and that is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. I was absolutely obsessed with this the whole time I read it. It took me a while, but mainly because it's so chunky, but also so like every moment is so lush that you want to like sit in it. I just loved it to pieces. This is another sapphic book. It's kind of like a polyamorous entanglement. I don't want to call it a polyamorous romance because it's not endgame. It's just kind of like entanglements. Oh, it's kind of it. I don't know. It's not so clear cut as endgame. It's not a romance at heart. This is a horror story, kind of like a genteel horror. And we're following kind of 3 stories, and then a omnipresent narrator who plays some role, but it's unclear who they are. So we follow a time in the past where this school had some children, some girls at the school. It was an all-girls school, and a couple of girls, like they had a lot of affairs within the girls because, you know, all-girls school, and everyone's exploring their femininity, sapphicness. So there was a couple, like 2 girls who died in a swarm of wasps, and then another girl died. Like there's a whole lot of deaths, mysterious deaths at this school, which then ties in to the principal of the school, her sapphic relationship with her lover, and the way they grew up and things that were happening to them at the same time, and how everything came about of how they were at the school. So there's that kind of timeline, and so that's kind of like a very Picnic at Hanging Rock-esque horror, where it's all very turn of the century, feels very lush and historical in an eerie way, which I really enjoyed. And then we also follow in current times a group of 3 girls who are involved in the making of the movie of those events, mainly around the girls who died, and the 2 girls that died are like the main cast of the movie. And then things are happening on set to them in a kind of Blair Witch Project style horror. So you got these 2 kind of elements combating against each other, and the 3 girls in current times have a lot of entanglements between them and a lot of chemistry between them. One is the writer of the book that the movie is being based on, that she wrote about these historical events, and the other 2 girls are actresses playing the 2 leads. So there's this kind of entanglement between the 3 of them, and it just develops so well. So well, and it's just so absorbing the whole way through. The only thing I will say is that it does end with a lot of loose threads and kind of abruptly, which is kind of true to the genre. Like if you watch something like Blair Witch Project, everything kind of happens really quickly at the end and it's done. You know what I mean? It does kind of wrap up very fast with not a lot of conclusions of like what was real and what wasn't, but I enjoyed that anyway. This was so good. I give it 5 stars. I totally recommend you read it. It's absolutely amazing. I want to like push it at everyone. Then Then I read this little book called Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour. This is another like gentle horror. We follow, what's her main character's name? Mila, who's a foster kid who's just aged out of the system, and she's got this job on this farm where they take in and adopt other foster kids. And it's a big exploration of trauma and grief and how these things all come together. She's carried a lot of trauma with her into the foster system, as expected, and then her kind of growing and healing from that, and there's kind of a ghosty element to this. This was so beautiful. It's really short. It's only like 220 pages, I think. Yeah, 260. It's not very long at all. It's very poignant. It happens all really carefully and well constructed. I didn't cry, which like Nina LaCour set me up to cry with her previous novel We Are Okay, and I feel like I just had that expectation of myself going into this and it didn't quite hit me quite as much, so I gave it 4 stars, but it was still really, really good and I really enjoyed it. Then I listened to The Yield by Tara June Winch, which is another Indigenous Australian release, and it follows a girl called August, whose grandfather has recently died, and their farm is kind of in a standstill between, they don't technically own it because of a lot of the ways the Indigenous communities were engaged with by government, so the land was leased to them, and now the lease is up, so they've had it on a 100-year lease, and now that lease is up, and a mining corporation wants to come in and buy this land because they think it's got great shit they want. And she's trying to, they're trying to prove that they have land rights to the land as the Indigenous peoples that were from that area originally. So they're trying to prove that there was enough civilization happening on that land that they have land rights and they qualify as the original custodians and owners of that land anyway, so that the government doesn't have any ability to sell the land because it doesn't belong to them, if that makes sense. So they're arguing for, trying to find a way to argue for land rights for this area that they live on. The grandfather was also trying, he's loosely based on Stan Grant's father, who has been like a pioneer in recreating almost single-handedly the language of the area he was from, the original language of the area, and the August's grandfather in this is doing the same thing and recreating the language. They're on Wiradjuri land, and so they're trying to recreate the Wiradjuri language, like collect and build a dictionary of the Wiradjuri language and being able to bring it back into use, which is something that Stan Grant's father is doing, and specifically for the same group, the Wiradjuri. And so there's this whole thing of this dictionary that everyone kind of vaguely knew about, but no one knows if it was actually real or if he was just telling these stories about it. And August thinks that's a key component to getting their land rights. And it's all a lot of family dynamics, interpersonal dynamics within the town. They're mostly white town, and the group of Indigenous families that are all interconnected and all have differing relationships to the land and struggles there. And August had previously left and lived overseas, and now she's coming back as like a mid-20s woman, reconnecting to country, and it was just beautiful. I really, really enjoyed it. I listened to the audiobook. I do wish I kind of had read along, because I think I would have really benefited from having both a visual and an audio. So I gave it 4 stars because I feel like it didn't quite hit as hard as I wanted it to, but it was still really, really good, and I would 100% recommend it. It's so well constructed. I don't know, it was great. It was great. It was a 4 star, like a high 4 stars. Then I read Knock 3 Times, which is the 3rd Wizards of Once. Oh, I'm running out of battery. Let's speed this up. 3rd Wizards of Once. This is by Cressida Cowell. This is about wizards and witches and warriors, and they're all in fights against each other. This one was very fun. I do think it was probably my least favorite so far, but I'm really excited to read book 4. I gave this 4 stars. Then I listened to In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a memoir in vignettes, I guess, about sexual abuse and domestic abuse within queer relationships. She's lesbian. She was in a lesbian relationship that was abusive, and it kind of explores how that exists and how society views those kind of relationships. Like, they don't have men, so they shouldn't be abusive because only men can be abusive, kind of thing. And it was really interesting and really poignant and well done. I think it's very short and I would recommend you listen to it. It's on Scribd. I gave it 5 stars. Then I read Horrified by Katrina Leno. This is another haunted house kind of horror and ghosty horror, following a very like unlikable main character, but I loved to read about her. And she's moved back to her mother's like home that she grew up in, and she's seeing ghosts, and it's just so good. I gave this one 4 stars as well. It was just phenomenal though. It was absolutely stunning, and I recommend it highly. I don't know how to talk about it though because it's so strange. I read The Book of Dragons, edited by Jonathan Strahan and illustrated by Ravina Kai. Gave this 3 stars, which is probably true of most anthology collections. They're about dragons. There's some great stories in here, other stories I didn't like so much. Average out 3 stars. Then I read The Evercruel Kingdom by Rinch Paco, which is the sequel and finale, I think, to The Never-Tilting World. I enjoyed this. I do think I had some general just enjoyed less components of it. Like all the relationships are established in this, and it just didn't feel as like emotionally poignant in the relationships because most of that work had been done in book 1. And the plot seemed to rush ahead at places. Like, it just didn't quite settle in with me. But I do think Rinch Paco's worlds are so fun and interesting and engaging. Like, I don't totally recommend this, but I just don't think she's always like, she's not a 5-star author for me. She's like a solid 3.5, 4-star author where everything is just solidly good, just not outstanding. Like, little bits don't work for me, which is frustrating, but I really enjoy her premises and her plots and her characters. Just something holds me back. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether I'm not connecting properly with the characters, but something holds me back. Gave this 3 stars. Ran out of camera battery, position changed, but what was I talking about? Oh, the next book I read was The Night Swim by Megan Golden. This is a mystery thriller. It kind of is more mystery than thriller to me. Like, it was not so thrilling, but it's about a girl who has run this podcast that solved cold cases, like classic serial. Since serial, lots of these kind of podcast plot lines have come out. True crime podcast. But this time, this season of her cast is going to be about a rape case that is currently happening in court, and she's going to be following it through court. And so it's following the rape case, but also following these mysterious letters that she keeps getting left detailing a previous rape case. So she's kind of got a stalker who knows stuff about a previous rape case that's kind of tying into everything. I really enjoyed it. I listened to the audiobook and it was very fun. We do love a podcast audiobook. It's very entertaining. I do think it was much more mystery than anything else. So it wasn't, super thrilling, but the characters were really interesting and how everything developed was super cool. I gave it 4 stars, but if you're wanting something actually thrilling or suspenseful from a mystery thriller, this was not it. Then I read The Last of August by Brittany Cavallari. This is the sequel to A Study in Charlotte. This is a Sherlock Holmes retelling series following Charlotte and Jamie, who are the descendants of Sherlock and Watson, and then August Moriarty, and it's all like Sherlocky. I ended up giving this 4 stars as well. I had a great time reading it. Super fast paced and fun, and I love the narrative voice and things related to this, but I do think the way the mystery elements and the reveals unfold kind of didn't come together as neatly as I'd hoped. Like, a lot of elements like didn't make sense, but didn't feel well explained or described, and I didn't feel that like aha moment that you normally get from a Sherlock Holmes kind of thing. So that was my biggest disappointment with this, but it was only enough to like the actual plot and characters and fun was so enjoyable. So it only really docked a star. I did really enjoy this. Then I listened to You Had Me At Ola by Alexis Daria. This is a Latinx American, it's like, I think both characters might be Puerto Rican. I think the main character might be Puerto Rican Filipino. Can't quite remember. And the love interest is Puerto Rican, that are working in kind of like a Jane the Virgin, kind of based on a telenovela but made for like a Netflix show. And she's previously worked in soaps, he's previously worked in telenovelas, and this is like their kind of higher budget show that they've both landed in. She's fresh off a breakup that was kind of dramatic, and like she didn't get broken up with, he just like announced it to the media. And then what's her name, Yasmin. And then Ashton, the love interest, is has a son that he keeps secret from everyone, and it's their like romance. It's a romance. I enjoyed this. I do think it was a little cheesier than some of the other romances I read during the month. Like The Roommate I thought was less cheesy, but I still really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I think maybe the narration might have led to the cheesiness, and if I read this in a physical copy I might have thought it was less cheesy. But the character dynamics were fun. I do think it had the classic like I got so frustrated over their inability to communicate, but that's kind of normal. Like that, it doesn't bother me, I just get frustrated, but it's so realistic. And yeah, it was fun. It was dramatic, it was sexy, it was fun. Again, still had that problem with early sex scenes in a romance. Don't work for me. I just cringed through the first couple, but it was fine. By the time we got to the end, it was great. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read the other chunker of the month, and that is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. This is the 3rd and final book in the Poppy War trilogy. It's literally huge. It's 600 pages. And I finished this literally last night at shortly before midnight. But we fitted it in. This is so good. This is probably actually my favorite of the series, though looking back on the Dragon Republic, it's like, I think this had the best reading experience for me throughout, whereas both the first and second books felt slow, and then I got to the end and I loved it. But throughout I was struggling, whereas this I didn't struggle at all. The plot was really driving. This whole series is a loose retelling of some of the like kind of like a mushed combination of the Opium Wars, the Sino-Japanese Wars, Mao Zedong, rise in China, and then also with this magical element of shamanism where some people can access the gods that give them power. So our main character, Fang Rin has fire. She can set things on fire, but that kind of develops across the first book. She's kind of coming into that in the first book, and this is really the pinnacle of everything, and I did really love it. I thought it was a bit more cohesive, I think, than book 2, which is where book 2 probably got let down. But this series does like have chunks of like fast-paced action, and we then skip over anything that's unnecessary. Does that make sense? Like we just, when there's nothing much happening but you know things have happened, like there's sudden leaps in time. So I think some people weren't prepared for that, so some people find the first one having pacing issues, but it's like, if nothing happened, we're not talking about it, we're just zooming past. And I don't mind that. This is a lot of war, political machinations stuff. It's very war heavy political, but in a most brutal, impactful way. I loved this. I gave it 5 stars. And so following on from that, my final book of the month was The Drowning Faith, which is a collection of scenes from, like, it's a 2.5 collection of scenes from Naza, who's one of the other characters in this, his perspective. Just like a collection of vignettes that tie into the series, and I gave it 4 stars. They're short, it's very quick, but I thought they were really interesting and insightful, and I enjoyed them a lot for what they were. Obviously they're just vignettes, so like I couldn't really give them a 5 stars, but they were high quality vignettes. So those are all the books that I read in the month of January. I'm really proud of myself. I didn't read as much as I had been reading last year, but I kind of appreciate that I took that step back. Oh, my food's almost here. I took that step back and really let myself read some big books. I was also super busy, so I feel like my audiobook reading was much, like I read much less audiobooks than normal, but I was really busy and didn't have much audiobook time, so that kind of makes sense. I feel like I just let myself have a break, and I enjoyed basically everything I read. Nothing I actually disliked. Some things I liked more than others, but it was a great reading month all around, I feel like, and I hope that continues into February. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Thanks, bye.